Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I believe we have pretty much everyone renamed as necessary. We have about 37 attendees on for 48 participants total. I do expect that we will get more as the evening goes on. I would like to say thank you once again for your patience. This meeting is being recorded. As we go through the evening, anyone that has registered to speak, I will allow them to speak by our controls here. They will not be seen on the screen except for if they are going to be sharing some slides that they've prepared and notified me in advance. The presentation will be run by Chris Harold of Milestone, and what we will do is during our question and comment period, Milestone and their representatives will gather the questions and comments together, and they will answer them when everyone who's registered to speak has had their opportunity. If there's something that's urgent, Chris, you can certainly jump in and say that you need to address that immediately. We've had one question from the chat already about whether or not we would be able to share the list of participants at this point to the attendees. I don't believe that I can do that, but I can certainly make that list available after the meeting to anyone who's interested as to who the participants are. Obviously, we're not going to share any contact information for them unless that's all right with them. But we do have our participants identified on the screen as being a representative of Fairfax County or being a representative of Milestone or Verizon or any other engineering company that is working with Milestone. We do have Planning Commissioner Ohlfelder as a panelist this evening. He's also available for view on the screen. So welcome Chris Harold of Milestone, Commissioner Ohlfelder, Fairfax County, Ben Wiles of Supervisor Faust's office, Kathy Lewis with Fairfax County, Renee Frustasi, I believe, I hope I didn't ruin your name, of Milestone, Paul Dugan, Millennium Engineering, Matt Penning, also with Milestone, Noah Desta with Verizon, and Salem Bush of Fairfax County. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Chris Harold for his presentation, and then we will start with our commentary. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you everyone for joining tonight. I know we had a community meeting back in December that I hope many of you were able to attend. And at the recommendation of Commissioner Ohlfelder and Mr. Wiles and Ms. Falcone, we wanted to come and present to you about the site. We've done some more research on some of the questions that were brought up during that initial community meeting, and think that we can address some of those as well as answer any further questions that you all have at this time. So I'm going to share my screen here, so bear with me a second. Let me know if you can see that all right. Great, I see Jennifer's head nodding, so I'll take that as a yes. So as you know, we have submitted an application for a wireless tower at the Wolf Trap Fire Station on Beulah Road. And just a little background about us. We've been in business for over 20 years. We've constructed over 130 wireless towers with mainly public owners, occasionally private landowners. Virginia, we've developed most of our towers in Virginia, and you can see our list of some of our landowner partners here. Locally, we've developed over 30 towers with Fairfax County schools. We are working on our 7th or 8th with the Prince William County schools, developed about 10 with Prince William County parks. We're working on a number of sites with Loudoun County and Loudoun County schools as well. So they're all right in our backyard. The reason why we partner with public landowners is typically the use fits in with wireless development. It needs to be near residences, and and businesses in order to provide the coverage needed. And usually those parcels are in those areas. As you know, wireless use has been increasing over the years. No need to tell you that. Here's some stats. But as you know, this area has continued to get developed, and especially along Route 7. As you all know, the road is expanding. There's more development in Tyson's, and there's been a significant gap in coverage in this area for many years, dating back to 2002, when I believe Community Wireless Structures applied for the first application at the St. Andrew's Chapel Church, a little bit further down Route 7. And then I believe there's two subsequent applications in 2008 and 2012 that also came before the Board of Supervisors. So you can see over the past 20 years, there's been a need for coverage in this area. And with more development and more density in this area, it's only needed more at this time. Verizon reached out to us about this site. They had initially approached two other landowners who were not interested. One was the Wolf Trap Nursery, which, as you know, is under review for being developed into a senior living facility. The other was the Potomac Farms, which had no interest in developing a site on their property. So they approached us, Milestone, because we've partnered with them on several sites, municipal sites, and we saw the Fairfax County owned site nearby that may work. So this site is needed, as I said, because there's a gap in coverage. You can see on the screen here, and hopefully you can see my mouse. Each of these Verizon circles indicates an existing Verizon site. And this area right here is lacking in coverage and capacity. So this would help offload some of these other sites as folks are traveling through the roadways, as well as provide coverage to the residences in this area. Verizon also, AT&T and T-Mobile have also indicated an interest in the site. We have a letter of intent from T-Mobile for this site. AT&T has also provided an RF justification letter stating the need for coverage in this site. We've also received interest from Dish Networks, which is a new entrant to the market. So we could potentially have 4 wireless carriers on the site to provide service to many different wireless subscribers. Getting on to the next slide here, you can see, as similar to the picture I showed just before, these are the existing sites. So you can see these kind of pinwheel icons indicates a wireless tower, and the colors around it indicate different levels of service. So the blue is typically a very strong in-building coverage. Green is typically good roadway and car. You can make a call inside your house. Yellow is getting spottier, and then red is poor coverage. So you can see in this area, it all kind of fades and congregates in this area where Verizon is trying to improve coverage in. And we have a senior RF engineer from Verizon Wireless on the phone who can speak more to this shortly. You can see this second slide shows what the proposed site would do in terms of coverage, how it would kind of fill in that gap. So I'll go back here just to see the before. And then this is what would be proposed. So you can see we get some in-building coverage, some better traffic coverage and in-house coverage, and provide some more capacity along Route 7 here, which is where Verizon is trying to cover. And same goes for AT&T and T-Mobile. You would see similar maps for them for the same coverage area. And now I will just ask you if there's anything I'm missing there before I move on. But before I kick it over to you, here's a map just showing if this were a standalone tower, this is the coverage that you would get from just that tower. So again, I'll go back just so you see the need for coverage, what that coverage would be with the existing tower, and then just standalone where this tower is going to improve coverage in. And now I'll just ask you to chime in if I'm missing anything. If I'm not, then just let me know as well. And hearing none, I'll just keep moving on. And now to interrupt.
Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute my mic, but that sounds fine. You're just going to continue with the rest of.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't unmute it right away. Yes, you pretty much covered it. It was a pretty good summary. Um, Basically, we are trying to provide coverage to the residential area and Route 7 to fill in the coverage gap between the existing Verizon towers. Because of the terrain and the density of trees, we have received multiple complaints from customers with poor coverage. So this macro solution will be the best solution for this particular location.
Great. And now I'm going to have you stay on the line here because we're going to go into one of the questions that came up a lot during our last community meeting was why can't small cells be used to cover the same coverage objective, and why can't it meet Verizon's needs? I'm going to give just a brief, just general layman's terms overview of how macros and small cells work, and then now I'll kick it over to you to kind of explain a little more of the technical specifics. But generally, macro is what we call towers that are up to 200 feet in height. So typically between 100 to 200 feet in height, that's the tower that we're proposing here. It's 114 feet in height. So we call that a macro tower. Those sites, typically they cover a range of 1 to 2 miles, and they are to overlay coverage in an area. They are the driver of where consumers get their service. Small cells, on the other hand, are the shorter structures that you'll see sometimes along Georgetown Pike, I believe. You'll see them in more dense urban areas. And those are smaller. You'll see a canister on top of a light pole or a traffic light or on the side of a building. And those are smaller coverage ranges of about 300 to 500 foot radius. And those are more to enhance the macro site. So it's more of a supplement to the macro site to help offload traffic from the macro site and just overall kind of fill in the spots where the macro site isn't able to reach. And now I'll kick it over to you to kind of explain that a little bit more if I misspoke.
Yeah, that's pretty much a good summary as well. Typically, small cells will cover. I'm sorry?
Sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah, small cells typically have a smaller footprint and very targeted area where, attempting to cover a very small targeted area like a dense urban, shopping mall or busy areas. So typically we will deploy a macro, identify coverage holes or capacity need, and then we will deploy small cells to offload traffic or to fill in the coverage gap, basically. So it's an overlay and an underlay coverage. So the macro will be deployed first, and then based on coverage need and capacity need, we deploy small cells to supplement or to enhance the macro coverage. So
okay, and just to anticipate some of the questions now, I know one of the questions that got brought up was, has Verizon looked at a small cell deployment in this area in lieu of a macro site? And can you explain why a small cell network would not meet the same objective as a macro site?
Yes, so typically for this particular location, a small cell will not adequately provide coverage to the larger footprint that is needed to be covered, especially to the east and to the west. So the best solution would be a macro at this point. And then we will look at, after if we deploy a macro, we will look at the coverage gaps. If they are, we will do a drive test, and then we'll find out, where we have coverage gaps due to the terrain or the landscape, and then we will deploy small cells. That's what we typically do. But small cells are not, for this kind of environment, small cells are not the best solution to be deployed initially. Okay.
All right, I'm sure we'll get some more questions about that later, but that's a Great overview. Thank you, Ned. Again, these are the alternative sites that were ruled out. You'll see the blue star is the Wolf Trap Nursery, and the yellow star is the Potomac Vegetable Farms. There's also a site that, as many of you know, was proposed by Community Wireless Structures at the Andrew Chapel United Methodist Church, a little bit further down Route 7. Just to kind of separate where that application came in compared to ours, and just some things that stand out from the two, is that application was on a much smaller parcel, not much smaller, but it was only 7 acres as opposed to ours is 11.5 acres. That tower was proposed at 120 feet, whereas ours is 6 feet lower. Maybe insignificant, but it is a lower structure. They also were 200 feet away from the closest residential property line, whereas we are about 375 feet away from the closest residential property line. Theirs also was a private use with community events going on at the church. There was a nursery that was being run in the church, daycare, and ours is a public use. It's a fire station. So for those reasons, I think that our site is better sited and a better application than that original site at Andrew Chapel United Methodist Church. Just a quick stat, there's about 1,000 residential parcels that'll be served by this new tower. Going into more of the site selection, again, the parcel is about 11.5 acres. It's owned by the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County, and it's being used as a fire station. There's existing tree cover to the south and the east, and we are proposing a 50-foot by 50-foot fenced-in compound. It'll be a chain link fence with privacy slats. There'll be an access road coming off of the parking lot. And these green areas here may be a little hard to see, but this is where landscaping is being proposed. So we're kind of filling in the gaps here along this southern line, which is a new addition since the last time that we spoke. Per comments from staff, we wanted to provide some more visual mitigation to the south here. We're also landscaping the west and south sides of the compound, as well as the northeast side of the compound. And also, just for reference, only 5 trees will be removed for the installation of this compound. We went out and did a tree survey, and it was determined that only 5 trees would be impacted. And I think our total planting is going to be somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 trees are going to be planted total. Sorry, keep flipping back and forth here. Here we go. So the tower will, as I said, it will initially hold Verizon, but likely hold AT&T and T-Mobile as well as potentially Dish. The reason for the height of the tower is to provide all these carriers with enough height to clear the tree line and provide coverage to the area. This is just an engineering drawing of the tower elevation view. So you can see the fenced compound down here, the tower, and then each of these, we call them RAD centers for each of the carriers. Here's some examples of work we've done in the past. This is a site in Prince William County at Turley Fields. This is a site in Prince George's County, I believe at Kenmore Middle School. Yes, this is Mayhew Fields right off of Route 66 in Prince William County. There's a site we built down in Danville. And this is a site in Frederick County. And this kind of shows you what the initial installation looks like. So these trees will grow to a height and ultimately conceal this. But this is at the initial installation. I think Fairfax County actually will require us to plant these trees at a higher height than what's shown here. The process, Fairfax County allows for telecommunications facilities through a special exception process. That's why we're going through this review with you all, with the county staff, with Commissioner Ohlfelder and Supervisor Faust in their office. We're required to go through this process and submit these applications to the county for review. We do a number of due diligence items. We survey the property. We make sure we're in compliance with FAA and FCC guidelines. With the National Environmental Protection Agency does a study. We get an environmental report an archaeological study, study of adverse effects to historic properties. We have to check all those boxes and satisfy all the guidelines that those jurisdictions set. We conduct a balloon fly, which many of you saw was a few months ago. We took photos both in the summer and the winter to show the difference of the visual impact when there were trees, leaves on the trees versus not. And then we do a geotechnical analysis to test the soils and get a good indication of the ground that we're building on. Part of the land use application, we have a pre-application meeting with the county, and you can see here's the full process that we've been through so far. So we've gone through multiple reviews with the county and their staff. We initially had the pre-application meeting where we just speaking generally about what's needed to submit the application. We got all materials together and submitted in July. Then it goes through this quality review process, which is what we're calling QA/QC here. So you can see we got multiple rounds of comments, 4 rounds of comments from quality review before the application even is accepted. So we went through, 4 months of review before the application was accepted by the county. And then the planning and zoning staff formally starts reviewing it and submitting their comments. We did receive 1 round of comments and submitted a response to those comments before we had our first community meeting. And then we put a hold on any more submittals until we spoke with you all because we wanted to address any of your concerns and make sure that we could make any changes as needed. There are 3 different applications that are going to the board here, and it is a special exception application, which is required to develop a tower in a residential zone. This is zoned to R2, which is a residential use, so we do need a special exception to develop a telecommunications tower in that district. There's also a 2232 compliance application, which is wireless specific. And then there's a proffer condition amendment. When this property was developed into the fire station in 2005, I believe, there was proffers placed on the property for the use of fire station as well as potential future residential development to the south. Obviously, that residential development has not happened, but it is proffered into the development plans. We would need to get an amendment to those proffers to allow for the telecommunications facility on site as well. So there's 3 different applications there that are all being reviewed by staff and would have to go to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors for public approval. We're required to have a community meeting, and we held that in December. And we have held off on Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors until we've had this meeting as well, again, to address any concerns that you all might have. If we can address your concerns tonight, make any design changes as needed, then we would schedule dates to go before the Planning Commission and Board. And those are public hearings that the community would be able to come out to and speak to and voice their opinion. If those both are approved, we would then need to go through a site plan and building permit review process with the county that takes another 3 to 4 months. Assuming that we meet all the site plan and building permit criteria and we get approved for our permits, we would then start construction, which would take about 4 to 6 weeks to develop the tower. After that, visits would be about once a month, once every 2 months by carriers in order to maintain their equipment. I know this is a lot of information here, so we can go back over any of this as you all have questions. Here is the community notification and outreach process that we went through. And I know many of you know about this community meeting, which is why you're participating today as well. We watched a site-specific website, which is wolftrapfswireless.com. Feel free to go to that for updates and reminders about what's happening with the application. We hosted the town hall on December 17th, and we're talking to you all today. The McLean Citizens Association, just to note, did meet on February 3rd, and they issued a notice that of approval for this site. This is the last piece here that I'm going to go into before I turn it over to the Q&A. And these are the photo simulations of what the tower would look like once it is constructed. Due to comments that we received in the first community meeting and thereafter, we did 2 sets of simulations, one showing the monopole, which we initially proposed, and one showing a tree pole, which some community members believed would be a better visual solution. I'm going to run through these just a bit slowly here. So you can see this map shows all the locations that we took photos from. The green locations show where the site was visible from. You can see a couple of these, such as 15 and 13, were not visible in the summer, but they were visible in the winter. So as I stated before, we took 2 sets of photo simulations, one in the summer, one in the winter, to show what it would look like with the trees with leaves on them versus not. Again, I know some community members were upset that we did not get photos from more locations. We tried to get photos from as many representative locations as we could. As you drive through these streets, sometimes a house or a tree will block a view that another house or tree may not. We tried to get a photo that was representative of each location. So this is starting to freeze up on me here with these photos. So this is a photo. I'll show the juxtaposition between the monopole and the tree pole. So this is from Route 7, right across Route 7 of the monopole versus the tree pole. This is further down Route 7, and I'll just scroll through these slowly, and then we'll get to the Q&A. It's the tree. This is the monopole. This is the tree pole. It's the monopole. And those are these photos that we are about to show right now. We were asked to take photos from it's almost the backyards of these properties. We stayed on the fire station property, but we tried to get as close as we could. And keep in mind that the tree pole, because in order to make it with a crown and not a flat top toilet brush style, we need to increase the height of the tree pole by about 8 feet. And that's all. So love to open it up for any Q&A. Jennifer, all. Thank you very much for allowing us to present.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, we are going to start with our first speaker that registered, John Callanan, who is actually going to present a few slides of his own. And John, you can start your video, and let's see, we'll start your video, and then you can do your presentation and recognize your other speaker, and then I'll move down the list. As I said, we will go to the questions after we get through our list of registered speakers. We'll also go to the Q&As that are being listed online. I think our panelists, Chris, and your representatives can see those Q&As as they load. So go ahead, John. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. And I have to start by thanking GFCA and especially you, Jennifer, for your outstanding partnership and collaboration. I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. We're deeply appreciative for this partnership, and we very much look forward to continuing our work together as we oppose this proposal and we support small cell technology in the area. I just want to clarify real quick, is Supervisor Faust online tonight, or is he not here?
Hi, no, it's Planning Commissioner Alfelder and I are here representing the office.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so my name is John Callanan, and I represent a Country Place. Country Place is the neighborhood that's most affected by this proposal. And I'd like to start by saying in the clearest possible terms that a Country Place joins GFCA in strongly opposing a tower in our community. I'd like to highlight for everybody that there are two participants in this meeting tonight who support putting a 114-foot tall metal pole into our community, or 22-foot pole if it's a tree pole in our community. The first is Milestone. They support a pole because this is all their company does. They build poles, so they support the pole. The second party that supports the pole tonight is Verizon. Verizon supports this pole because this is a cheaper alternative than more advanced and more focused small cell solutions. The rest of us are here tonight either because we want better coverage or we want to prevent placement of a structure in our community that is wholly inconsistent with the R2 zone land use in this area. So I'd like to ask if somebody does speak up tonight and supports a pole, if they could describe exactly why they want a pole instead of better coverage through a more tailored method, the small cells. More on that in a few minutes. So that leaves the rest of us here. Those of us who are here tonight to oppose the pole, given that it is truly inconsistent with land use in an R2 residential community. This proposal would, without question, cause a drop in property values and would significantly undermine the community, the great community that we have here in a Country Place. In short, this pole would, without a doubt, hurt the greatest single investment that many of us have. We are counting on housing prices to stay flat here. Maybe they'll go up, which is even better. But a pole in the middle of our community will forever change that. We've heard from Milestone in the past that in their experience, these poles do not hurt property value, and they cited or referenced a pole that was placed at a high school. The sidebar to that is the pole was placed at a high school in between other very tall lights on a field far away from houses. Maybe that did or maybe that didn't hurt property value. But when you have a pole that's placed 300 feet from your backyard, there's going to be impact and it will be negative. So if you don't mind, Jennifer, I'd like to hit the share screen here and bring up a few slides. So who we are. Jennifer, can everybody see this? Okay, great, thank you. So who we are. This is who we are. We are an established neighborhood, a very tight-knit community, established in the 1970s. We weathered a proposed cell tower here in the 1990s, and we opposed it, and that tower was never sited here based on our opposition to it. We opposed that tower based on the exact same grounds that we opposed this tower. It's also the exact same grounds that our neighbors opposed the Andrews Chapel Tower. It is simply inconsistent with the community. But tonight we're here not just to oppose a pole, but we're here to strongly encourage Verizon, Supervisor Faust, and Fairfax County to pressure Verizon to invest in more focused, precise, and tailored small cell technology to address local coverage gaps. We're not trying to kick this pole down the road to the next community, which was what was done to us here. Instead, we're trying to find a better solution that'll work for everyone. We're going to offer up our own photosims of the pole based on the balloon fly. But we note that the pole in our picture is much lower than the 114-foot tower that Milestone and Verizon are proposing, because that balloon was never straight up in the air. We're also showing a real world pole with multiple customer layers on it, not the fictional pole in Milestone's pictures with only one tenant on it. So this is the first photo, and it's taken on the north side of Route 7 at Farmingdale Court in Great Falls. As is obvious, this pole will be seen from many communities, including the Great Falls community. Had it been safer, we would have taken more photos from the homes along Route 7 on Great Falls, but the construction prevented this. But as you can see from that photo, we'll all have a good view of this tower. This is what the pole will look like, and this is based on the pole that's a little farther to the west on Route 7. How would you like to have this 300 feet from your backyard? Even more so, how would you like to have this 300 feet from your backyard when there are other alternatives? This photo is taken from Bent Creek Lane on the south side of Route 7. Again, about 300 feet from the backyard of that house. I'd like anybody to raise their hand and tell me if you would pay the going price for this house with that pole towering over its backyard. How can this not impact and crush property values in our small community? How can this not crush the very investment that we are, many of us, if not all of us, certainly my family, counting on for our retirement? Even further, federal regulations prevent the consideration of health issues when siting towers. But please tell me, anyone here tell me, how would you feel if that pole was looming over the backyard where your great-grandchildren or your grandchildren are playing? Are you okay with that? Because we're not. I don't care what the federal regulations say. They tell us there's no conclusive evidence that towers cause health problems. There's also no conclusive evidence that they don't cause health problems. Now we're in Sierra Estates. Sierra Estates will have full view of this tower. A few minutes ago, we heard Chris talk about tree coverage, landscaping, cutting down a few more trees. Hey, they're going to do some planting, so nobody will be able to see their green fence. It's about 6 feet tall, maybe 8 feet tall. Maybe in about 3 or 4 years, the shrubs that they plant there will cover that green fence. Not even close to good enough. Here's another view from Sierra Estates. Now, a few minutes ago, we heard Chris talk about the differences between the Andrews proposal and this proposal, but he left out one major thing, and that's impact. Impact to those houses in the community around the proposed sites. Take a look at this, please. The Andrews Chapel location was rejected by the Board of Supervisors based, and I'm quoting here, paraphrasing really, based on its impact to the community and the incompatibility with land use. As you can see here from this graphic, this proposed tower is closer to more homes, more than double the number of homes than the proposed tower at Andrews Chapel. So if the tower at Andrews Chapel was not okay, based on the impact to the community, then this is doubly not okay. Now, when the Andrews proposal went forward, the Board of Supervisors had a vigorous debate. Here's some comments from that debate. And the first part here, we're paraphrasing. But the tower lacks adequate screening, will have significant negative visual impact, is too close to houses, is in an R2 zoned area, doesn't take advantage of alternate and better technologies, microcells, does not resemble other structures in the area, has very strong community opposition, and will not enhance the community's existing character. That is this proposal, although those are the words of the supervisors from the Andrews proposal. In fact, more specifically, Supervisor Faust found that the previous proposal didn't comply with the standards of the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, would create an adverse impact due to the 120. Okay, that's Andrews. We're at 114, maybe 122. So it would create an adverse impact due to the 120-foot tower in an area where most of the existing structures measure less than 30 feet in height. And there were photo simulations that vividly illustrate the significant adverse visual impact to residents. Again, kind of coincidental, maybe not. I don't think so. These are all words expressed by the supervisors at the Andrew Chapel's proposal. All of this applies here in our neighborhood. So before I ask my friend and neighbor Nati to address the next slide, I want to emphasize the most important thing that's happened here tonight. And I hope everybody's paying very close attention to this. Milestone's coverage map that they just showed you a few minutes ago reveals that the 114-foot tower, this monstrosity that they want to put in our community, will not provide enhanced coverage to the Beulah Browns Mill area. So for those of you from that area, along the creek and up the other side of Beulah or down along Browns Mill, if any of you are here tonight supporting a pole, you're not going to get what you're expecting. Look at Milestone's map. There's no difference. But the good news is there is an alternative. The microcell technology, small cells. They will bring coverage right along Route 7, right down Beulah, right along Browns Mill, wherever Verizon wants to put it. The only problem here, and this is my parting thought as I pass it on to my colleague and friend Nati, the only problem that we have here tonight is that Verizon will have to pay more money for small cell technology. Let me stress that. Verizon, a multi-billion-dollar company, will have to pay more money to deliver small cell technology. Further, Milestone will be eliminated from this conversation because, as I said earlier, they only build poles. So when you consider the credibility and the different sides of what's being discussed here tonight, please remember that Milestone and all of the experts who are paid consultants on here tonight for Milestone have a vested financial interest in building a pole. Verizon also has a vested interest in building a pole because it's going to cost them less money. But they're going to do all of this at the cost of our neighborhoods, our investments, and our community. We remain strongly opposed. Nati, if you're on, I'm going to flip to the next slide and turn it over to you, please.
Thanks, John. And I'd like to show my gratitude to Great Falls Citizens Association again for my opportunity to speak. I'll be very brief in this slide. My name is Nati Wongsang Paiboon. Designing and building out cellular network was my profession as a radio frequency engineer for over 10 years. And I'm not the only one in this neighborhood that share extensive background in telecom and wireless network. Myself and other neighborhood expertise instinctively knew that a system of small cell or distributed antenna system solution is very feasible, especially for this location, and it is visually much more compatible with the surrounding land use. Actually, from a technological standpoint, it is far superior solution than a single industrial looking monopole, especially when the coverage objective is clearly to improve hilly areas with dense foliage along Beulah and Browns Mill. A system of small cells or distributed antenna systems actually allows engineers and designers the flexibility to be able to strategically place antenna on existing structures, such as powers or utility poles, where the coverage is actually needed most. And it can be designed, again, to be much more compatible with the surrounding land use, instead of a big monopole that blasting out radio frequency energy in order to reach as far as it can. The DAS system actually has been proven to work and preferred choice in residential areas like ours. In fact, we actually have one system, which is a big system in Great Falls, and another one in Oakton. Both systems proven to be working well. And to demonstrate that, we have actually engaged with a radio frequency engineering design firm to produce a representative coverage map for a generic small cell design in the area. In this example, we did a simulation to show a prediction of what coverage would look like for a system of just 7 nodes. Please note that in Great Falls, there are 48 nodes of distributed antenna system to cover Great Falls area. So the map clearly shows that excellent coverage can be had with this design. And clearly, this is not meant to be the actual design of the solution, but it's a great representation to show that it is a viable solution. Lastly, it is difficult not to notice, like John mentioned earlier, when you look back at slides 6 to 8 from Milestone presentation, it is clearly show that the proposed monopole actually does not meet Verizon's coverage objective, especially the coverage gaps along Browns Mill, which remain to be untouched even with the monopole. And I would argue that for public safety purposes, those coverage gaps in Browns Mill should be improved. And it should be a priority for people traveling down the road of Browns Mill, which clearly has a big gap and spotty coverage that the monopole solution cannot fix. But guess what? The DAS solution can. And that's the wrap for my session. Jennifer, back to you.
Thank you, Nati, and thank you, John. We are going to move on. For those of you that have questions in the Q&A, we will get to them at the end of our registered speaker list. And I also, we are recognizing and making note of people as they raise their hand in order. So keep your hands raised, but we will also call on those raised hands at the end of our, after Milestone and their representatives have an opportunity to address what we're speaking about tonight. So right now we have John Nelson. Go ahead, John.
Hello, I don't know if you can see me on the screen or not.
Actually, 1 minute, please. We're going to get John's screen off. Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I am the president of the Sierra Estates Homeowners Association. We're located very close to the firehouse and basically right behind the Wolf Trap Nursery in that general vicinity. We go from Bent Road over paralleling Highway 7 all the way over to Atwood Road, where it curves to join 7. I have not spoken to John Canin, the previous speaker, before, but I agree with everything he says, and so do our residents. So we are a Homeowners Association, was built in the 1990s. We have 31 homes and about 100 voters. And we are very passionate about opposing the building of this large monstrosity pole. We're against it for several reasons. The first has to do with health. We're aware of a number of studies that have been done both in the US and overseas about the detrimental effects on health for anybody who lives within 300 or 400 meters of such a large tower. And while that may be arguable, there's enough anecdotal evidence to certainly raise our concern levels. We have several residents who are lifelong engineers in telecommunications. And they confirm really the health concerns that many of our residents, if not all of our residents, feel at this point. Secondly, this is an eyesore as proposed. It is visible from most of the homes in our homeowners association, and therefore will probably have a negative effect on the value of our properties. Properties that we purchased with the understanding that the area would not be zoned for this kind of structure that would have a negative effect. And so this is a core economic issue for our members of our association. We had a homeowners association meeting yesterday after some discussion prior to that, and unanimously voted to oppose this with a passion. We look to Mr. Faust to continue to defend our interests in this area. And these interests, as I said, are core interests as far as we're concerned. We also look to him to convince the other supervisors involved in voting on this, that this is not a wise decision. So again, it's an eyesore, it's a health issue, it's an economic issue, and we plan to work with the surrounding homeowners association to vigorously oppose the construction of this tower. And that concludes my remarks. Back to you.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have Lon Waters. You are unmuted, or you are actually able to talk, so please go ahead.
Well, all right. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate to hear some of the community thoughts. I joined late, so I didn't get to see some of the Milestone materials. I'm a neighbor of Spring Ridge, and the neighborhood down here is unable, generally speaking, to make reliable phone calls, use our cellular service or anything. And that's a problem, especially when we're trying to work from home or when we're experiencing one of our very common power outages around this area. And to a neighbor, everyone I've spoken with about this is looking very much to being able to use their phones at their house. So this community, this neighborhood is in support of those, in support of the cellular service improvements that this pole could bring. I don't want to weigh in very much against the neighbors who are opposing it, but I just wanted to raise another perspective on this issue. Thanks. Over.
Thank you, Lon. Next up, we have Jeff and Susan Malka. Go ahead.
I didn't actually prepare. Thank you. I'm Jeff Malka. Susan is my wife, and we both live right off Bent Creek Lane, where this tower is not only a monstrosity, it is horrendous. It's visible from just about anywhere around our house. We've been here for close to 48 years. 48 years. This is zoned R2. I am not an attorney. I don't know how these things work. But this is ridiculous. If the previous speaker wants it so much, I strongly suggest the tower be put in his backyard. He will get the best possible recording. And as far as Supervisor Faust is concerned, please note, we are vigorously opposed and we all vote. I've never missed a vote in my entire 70 years. So please, that's all I have to say, really. I agree totally with all the people who are opposed to it for the exact same reasons. This is purely a money issue. Verizon does not want to spend more money if it doesn't have to, but this solution does not provide what is promised and does it at a terrific eyesore. What do zones mean? What does it mean to have an R2 zoning if it's going to be forgotten when it's convenient for a big industrial company? Why is it that we need a special exemption? Precisely because this R2 zoning must mean something. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Did Susan want to make a remark while you have her on the line, or was your statement together?
I'll just say a few words. We've lived here for a very long time, and it is a lovely community. And I do understand people's fears about the health issues. I now have a lot of grandchildren, and frankly, I would not want them playing in a backyard with that tower. It is a horrendous eyesore, even if you decorate it up as a tree. I think it would be one thing if there was no other solution, but I think John and Natib presented really better solutions, not similar or equivalent, but a better solution, which would be compatible with the many neighbors that would be impacted by this tower or pole, I should say. That's more accurate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Sanjay Vani. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for this presentation and my previous colleagues who oppose this. I also want to say that I strongly oppose construction of this eyesore in my backyard. It's literally just behind my house. And there are two thoughts I wanted to share with Supervisor Faust is, just a few years ago, Andrew Chappell rejected this proposal, and the Board of Supervisors also endorsed that rejection. And it is surprising to see that this proposal is being proposed again just a few feet from Andrews Chapel. And so if it was rejected by Andrews Chapel, why should it be, not rejected now? So this is something that we would like to really understand as to how, the county works, The second is why I oppose this, because I definitely see that this will bring in health issues as well as it will bring down the property values. And I just sent it in my Q&A attachment to the link where a survey was done and where they found that generally the prospective buyers and renters don't like to come near the area where such a kind of monopole is constructed. So we do have research to suggest that the property values do drop when such a eyesore is constructed. So with that, I just wanted to once again reiterate that I do oppose the construction of this monopole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Michael Watlet. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to open by saying I understand the frustration of many of our neighbors. I live in the Country Place neighborhood as well, and with the cell phone coverage. However, to the Spring Ridge neighborhood, I just like to point out, you're not going to get the coverage that you're asking for, that you think you're going to get because of this monopole. That's already been presented. The second thing is, I agree with everything that was said, but I'd like to add one more thing. A complete frustration with the local government. In particular, we just had our kids involuntarily moved in a rezoning against the wishes of the entire neighborhood. Now it seems like they want to put a monopole in our neighborhood. And it just seems like we're under attack from all directions, that the government doesn't want to represent the interests of the neighbors and the community members, but they're in the pockets of corporations and interest groups. And so I put that out there, that I would just ask for the Board of Supervisors to do what the neighbors around this monopole want to be done. And the reason I have this frustration is I've sent numerous emails and I've not gotten a response from Supervisor Faust or anybody else. And that's why I'm frustrated. With that, I just end it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Catherine Chalmers. Go ahead, Catherine. I'm not hearing Catherine, so maybe we will come back.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for putting this together. I'm extremely upset about this tower. It's an eyesore in our neighborhood. It absolutely defaces our neighborhood. But as you know, as a technophile and tech junkie, I definitely value the opportunity to have better cell phone coverage. We've had garbage cell phone coverage since we moved here 20 years ago. Unfortunately, this is absolutely not the solution to that problem. By putting this monopole in our neighborhood, Verizon is basically giving a forget you to our neighborhood and guaranteeing that we will continue to have substandard internet, wireless internet in our neighborhoods for the next 30 years over the life of this pole. I mean, this pole does not support 5G technology, and 5G devices are already shipping. And I'd like to read, you mentioned that T-Mobile is going to have a set of cells on this tower, and also Verizon. Well, I'd like to quote from T-Mobile's website, quote, "Our ultra capacity 5G is bringing speeds as fast as Wi-Fi to over 100 million Americans." And the quote on Verizon touting their 5G network is that 5G networks will one day offer peak data rates up to 10 gigabits per second. So far, 5G has the potential to deliver speeds many times faster than today's 4G, powering uses such as intelligent video, remote diagnostics, and mobile command centers for live audio and video. Well, that's not what we're getting with a 4G pole. So you're going to deface our neighborhood and stick us with old-fashioned technology for 30 years? I'm not hearing any of these companies offering us a massive discount for old technology. They mentioned in the presentation earlier that that would be about 1,000 residential homes that would be served cellular service with this tower. Well, if those 1,000 homes are paying what we're paying for internet through FiOS and telephone, then not only is Verizon cutting corners to put up a cheap pole instead of investing in the right kind of technology that would not deface our neighborhood and give us 5G networks, but they're also preserving the fact that 1,000 families have to spend between $1 million and $4 million a year to continue with FiOS service because they won't be able to get the kind of service they need on their wireless handsets. And for light internet users, that's a substantial difference. If you're only reading email, doing the occasional internet search, and maybe a little bit of streaming, you won't need the FiOS full fiber optic wireless broadband. You would be able to use just your cell phone. And that is an absolutely egregious abuse of these 1,000 neighbors.
Thank you, Catherine. Next up, we have James Lee. And while James gets himself ready to start speaking, go ahead. We're going to get his photographs up on the screen. Thank you. Are you there, James? Okay, I don't hear James, so bear with us a second. We're going to see if we can unmute Sunith Wijitonga. Go ahead, Sunith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I'm just going to piggyback on some of my other neighbors. I live behind the fire station properties, and it's certainly going to be an eyesore. And not to mention, this is not consistent with the current zoning. So I mean, we are a neighborhood. I mean, this tower is not, it's a commercial endeavor. So that's something that bothers us a lot. Also, all of our neighbors. One thing about the McLean Association, they don't live here. I mean, I know some of them, the previous speaker just mentioned that they did approve, but I mean, it's in our backyard. I mean, that's not fair for the folks who actually live here. And unfortunately, they don't live here. That's my comment, and I strongly oppose the tower. Thank you.
Thank you, Suneet. We're going to try again with James Lee. Go ahead, James, if you can unmute yourself. I think we're having some technical difficulty with James, so we're going to try and find and allow Jose Padilla to speak, so bear with us.
Signed up.
Okay, we're going to go back to our list. We're going to get to, we're going to see if we can find Randy Shoemaker and go to Randy, and then we'll come back to others. If James is available, maybe he can send me a text, and we'll unmute Randy in just a second. Go ahead, Randy.
Good evening, Jennifer and everyone else on the line. Thank you for the opportunity to offer some comments. You know, we're a body of laws in this country, and in looking at the regulations, the comprehensive plan, the zoning special exceptions rules that have been laid down here, Milestone has failed to meet the requirements of these. The comprehensive plan requires the county to encourage land use patterns that protect, enhances, or maintain stability in established residential neighborhoods. Objective 8. It's also required that in looking at the use of this land, the Wolf Trap Community Planning Sector section, of which we are a part, states that land south of Leesburg Pike should be maintained for an average density of 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre, and the land immediately adjacent to the highway should remain as open space and provide a buffer for residential areas. The Route 7 corridor is planned for and should continue to be reserved for residential development, industrial, which this tower clearly is, office, R&D, and retail commercial uses are not appropriate in the Route 7 corridor. It is clearly directly against the rules that have been laid down, even for special exemptions. The special zoning exceptions require Milestone's proposed tower, which would be an alternative to use of public property, to, quote, not adversely impact the adjoining residential community in terms of, among other things, general visual impact. It is clearly going to have a huge visual impact. It also requires screening, buffering, or landscaping so that it doesn't impair the value of adjacent properties, which is part of the general standard section 9006. So Milestone's proposed use fails to meet all specified standards. It doesn't exclude the standards that don't conform to Milestone's application. All these standards have to be met and put in use with harmony of the comprehensive plan and compatibility with the surrounding residential neighborhoods. So we understand that the county has rejected other proposals which I think speak to the comments of other presenters prior to this. I just have to say, for the McLean Citizens Association endorsement of this 114-foot monopole, it just sounds hollow and contrived. The same reasons it opposed 3 such towers in McLean's backyard are identical to ours. And while the McLean rascals have a right to speak, they should not have standing to foist the commercial monopole in our backyards when they refuse to do so in theirs 3 different times, all recently. So while citizens don't have a voice, apparently, when it comes to radiation effects from high-powered cell towers of the type that were being proposed here tonight, I would like to point out that Milestone and Verizon have failed to introduce a single population study of their towers in residential areas where they have them constructed, showing that their towers are safe and healthy for that community. We have firefighters in a firehouse, we have people living nearby, and they are introducing a commercial product into commerce, into our neighborhoods, and have made no studies available showing that their technology is safe. So while you cannot consider it, as the county officials on this call listen to my point here, it certainly is affecting a lot of us who live nearby. I, in particular, live directly behind the monopole on Bent Creek Lane, and one of the pictures that was shown tonight reflects that. The other point I guess I'll make is there's a lot of other pictures that were taken that day that would show a very clear infraction of visual quality for a lot of the homes that were not included. So I'll conclude my comments there.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, we are moving on to, and I hope I get this right, Sam Venkataramanan. I apologize if I didn't get that right.
No, thank you, Jennifer. You got it right. Thank you. So I just want to thank you, Jennifer, for organizing this. So I vehemently oppose this tower in this neighborhood. I was just looking at the Fairfax County zoning ordinance. So what it says is that the very intent of this zoning ordinance is to promote health, safety, and the general welfare of the public. But I don't think this tower is in that direction. First, it affects the safety, and then it doesn't go with the neighborhood. I hear from my neighbors, from this community, from my community, as well as the other community, this tower doesn't belong here. This is the industrial tower. It is not in an R2 zone. First of all, it is a huge health hazard. I heard about this in the prior town hall meeting as well. One of the experts was saying it is not, but I believe it is truly a health hazard, and it is not safe in this neighborhood. So I oppose this tower. Thanks for the time.
Does or can macro towers service 5G service? Yes, they can. And to address, let me see here, Ms. Chalmers' comment earlier about that Verizon will not be deploying 5G technology on this tower. At some point, they will, but at this time, they have no plans to, from our discussions with Verizon. So this tower will be, as all towers will be at some point, utilized for 5G technology. And that kind of plays into the next question. Why are you advocating for the monopole technology instead of a newer and more discrete technological option? As Nald had indicated before, and Nald and Paul, you can interrupt me if I'm speaking out of line here, but the small cell technology is more of a supplement to the macro tower. You need the macro coverage as an overlay before you can start deploying the small cell technology to supplement that service. Also to the terrain in the area and the coverage area, small cells were determined not to be an option by Verizon. Also with AT&T and T-Mobile, and this is just me hypothesizing here, there would be many more small cells for AT&T and T-Mobile. This macro tower allows for multiple carriers to provide coverage to a large area. And then the last question here. see here, I oppose an eyesore pole, which will be literally in my backyard. I oppose the pole for many reasons, primarily for health and property value reasons. A survey by the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy found that 94% of homebuyers are less interested and would pay less for a property located near a cell tower or antenna. Neighborhood cell towers and antennas, do they impact a property's desirability? That's the name of the article. Also found that properties where a cell tower or group of antennas are placed on top or attached to a building is problematic for buyers. Of the 1,000 people who responded to the survey, 79% said that under no circumstances would they ever purchase or rent a property within a few blocks of cell tower antennas, and almost 90% said that they were concerned about the increasing number of cell towers in their residential neighborhood. So that was, thank you for that comment. Again, I disagree. There are conflicting studies that state that there are no effects of property values. As I stated last community meeting, I am also a licensed real estate broker in Virginia. And I just briefly before this, I know it's imperfect data, but I pulled some data from the residences surrounding the tower at the Matchbox Auto Body on Route 7, which is just down the street. And there were 62 transactions. So that tower was built for AT&T back in 2007. And 62 transactions, sales have happened from 2007 until today. And property values have increased over that time by 29%. Compare that to houses, and that's within a third of a mile of the tower. Compare that to properties within a third of a mile of Wolf Trap Fire Station. There were 96 homes sold in that same time frame, and property values actually decreased by 16% in that same time frame. So again, imperfect data. There's obviously other factors at play, but if telecommunications towers is the argument for property values decreasing, these numbers, at least very locally, do not support that claim.
Thank you, Chris. We have up next, Calvin Cheng. Calvin, are you available?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you go ahead.
Yes, I'm also a resident in the Sierra Estate neighborhood here. John just spoke earlier, our board chairman, and I'm opposed to the tower as stated by John and others before me. It's an eyesore, and I think it's going to affect our property values negatively. And for these reasons, I oppose to the tower. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. We have registered for questions, Brian Trumpeter from the Sun Gazette. Go ahead, Brian. There is a possibility that Brian is recording this and will save his questions for later. Oh, Brian, I think you unmuted. Go ahead.
You caught me by surprise. No, I'm just interested in how things are going. I think I'm doing well, so I'm good to go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The next person that we have registered for a question or comment is Glenn Harris. Go ahead, Glenn. Bear with us while we find Glenn. All
right.
There you go.
Can you hear me now, Jennifer?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks to Great Falls Citizens Association for organizing this event. My name is Glenn Harris. I'm a resident of Chefs Village. If you don't know where that is, we're located behind Toaston Meadows, closer to Wolf Trap. I'm speaking in favor of the cell tower because in my house and many of my neighbors have very bad cell coverage. Oftentimes I have to walk out to the front of my house to be able to get 2 bars in order to be able to have a conversation. If I'm in the back of my house, often I'm on a phone call on my cell. It often just phases out. A number of my neighbors have the same problem. I understand the concerns of some of the people who live nearby, but I do think that we need to allow technological progress to occur. There have been several comments about adverse health effects from cell towers. I've done quite a bit of research on this. I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I was looking tonight, for example, at the American Cancer Society, which says on its website there's no evidence of any adverse health effects. They cite a study that the Food and Drug Administration did, which basically synopsized studies that were published between 2008 and 2018, finding no health effects, adverse health effects. My online research indicates that there are somewhere between 100 and 200,000 cell towers in the United States. I submit to you that if, in fact, there were the kind of adverse health effects that have been suggested by some of the commenters tonight, that there would be far more dispositive evidence of those adverse health effects. In fact, I think it's notable that none of the commenters tonight have specifically referenced a health study that has shown a causal effect between living proximate to a cell tower and adverse health consequences. I heard one speaker say anecdotal evidence. I heard another speaker say, that the advocates of the cell tower need to prove that it doesn't cause adverse health effects. I think that's a false proposition. I think that's probably close to impossible to do. So with all of these cell towers in the United States and elsewhere around the world, how can it be that there are not studies that definitively show a causal relationship between adverse health effects and cell towers? I submit to you that those studies don't exist from what I've been able to research. Again, I'm not an expert in this field by any stretch, but that is my sense based on my research. That being all said, some of the pictures that have been shown and the visual impact, I totally get that, and I'm sympathetic for that. I see that Catherine's putting a chat up about opposed the Andrew Chapel cell tower. I was actually in favor of the Andrew Chapel cell tower. But I do understand and sympathize for the visual effects. And I think that therefore it would be better to have the tree design, which in my mind, substantially mitigates the visual impact of the cell tower. There's a cell tower with a tree design that's along Route 7 as you approach Sterling on the left-hand side if you're driving towards Sterling. And, it's really not particularly noticeable. I do agree that the basic industrial looking cell tower is visually very unattractive. I wouldn't want that in my backyard, but I do think that if Milestone was willing to go with the tree design, which they appear to be willing to do, that would substantially mitigate the visual impacts from the cell tower. And one final thought, and then I'll shut up, and that is to say that, I am interested in the analysis that was done about the small cell coverage, and if in fact the small cell units provided equivalent coverage to a tall tower, then I would be in favor of those. I don't know whether that is in fact accurate or not. I would be very interested while we have Milestone and other representatives at the meeting to hear their response to the specific assertion that the small cell technology, although more expensive, would provide equivalent cell coverage to the tall tower. And if that were the case, that would change my mind about the tower. If in fact the coverage was not the same and the small cell was only going to be a local radius, wouldn't improve people's cell coverage unless they were in the immediate vicinity of the small cell, then I would be in favor of the tower. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so we've heard from a lot of people. I'm going to go back to that. Those were the registered speakers, unless for some reason, if we skipped your name, we cannot find your name on the list, or for some reason you did not respond when we tried to unmute you. We will try to come back to you. So if we skipped you, please use the raise hand icon. And then after we give Chris and Milestone and Verizon a chance to respond to a few more, we'll get back to some more questions. So go ahead, Chris, and we'll follow that format for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I don't see any more in the Q&A, but I see a bunch of comments in the chat. Would you like me to
Yes,
Maybe
if
the
there's
chat-
something,
okay.
if there's something that you can look at in the chat that is in the format of a question, but getting back to what some people have said, maybe I have a simple question. While you were going through your reasoning of, I think I heard you say, and I have been going back and forth between names and chats and so on, so forgive me if I got this wrong. I think I heard you say that you have to have the tower monopole and then deploy the small cell. Number one, is that correct?
And I will defer to Naud on these technological questions. And Naud, if you could unmute yourself. And just for reference, Naud, it represents Verizon. He's not represent Milestone. So
is that a correct? Is that correct? What I heard, and if
Yes, that is correct.
So if that is correct, it would seem logical to me in a simplistic term that you could deploy small cell technology from the existing towers and move them into the neighborhoods that seem coverage. Maybe that need the coverage. Maybe that's overly simplistic, but it would seem to me that that would be logical. Can you speak to that possibility? And if that is the case, then
correct.
The one would have to assume that there isn't any reason other than a cost factor if this is a possibility. So what we're weighing here is a simple, less expensive fix versus something that obviously is possible but is more costly. I just want to make sure if I am understanding that process.
Yes, you are correct. Technically, if we deploy more than, like the gentleman was showing, for example, a small cell coverage plot to cover 0.8 miles. The propagation map showed about 8 nodes just to cover 0.8 miles. So to cover about 3-mile radius, you can multiply that, and then, if we deploy, I don't know, I'll just throw a number out there, 60 to 80 small cell nodes, we could provide the same coverage, but we will be deploying and causing more disturbance to the area. For each utility pole, we will have to bring power, telco, run fiber to each location. So that is actually causing more disturbance to the area, right? And yes, of course, it will be more costly as well. So our strategy is to deploy small cells. After we deploy the macro, we will identify some coverage holes like you guys were talking about. There was an area that still was not getting adequate coverage even with the height of this tower. So we would propose to deploy small cells in those coverage gaps. Somebody brought up 5G. 5G will also be deployed on the macro. These antennas, or as long as we have the platform on the tower, we could add more technologies as we get approval. So that's another, I just wanted to address that. So like if you go to Tyson's Corner, denser area, Tyson's Corner Mall area, we are deploying ODAS, a cluster of nodes, because in that area, there's a demand for more capacity. There are more users there. So we do deploy that. In some areas, in some residential areas, we have deployed a cluster of nodes to supplement the existing macro in Great Falls area. So that is to say, we are not saying we will never deploy small cells in this area to meet the coverage need or capacity need, but we would have to take it step by step.
And now, I'm not an RF engineer, but that was just for Verizon. I'm just curious, I'm sure other people are wondering as well. Is AT&T and T-Mobile, I know that there are some neutral host small cell options where multiple carriers can utilize the same small cell canister on a pole. Is that possible for 3 carriers to do in one pole? And if not, what's that look like?
Yeah, that is possible. So some of the small cells in Great Falls area, for example, they are deployed by a third party called Crown Castle, right? So Crown Castle provides the infrastructure, and all the carriers will co-locate on the structure. So we do not have that infrastructure deployed in this area.
So if Verizon were to deploy a small cell network, AT&T and T-Mobile would not co-locate on that. They would need to deploy their own small cell network.
Yes. So if it is it's called a self-perform ODAS. So if it is a self-perform, meaning Verizon is building the infrastructure and co-locating, using all the utility poles in that area, then AT&T and T-Mobile will have to do the same thing. So they will have to will be a race between the carriers to deploy as much small cells as possible on every available utility pole, Dominion power or light poles, Cobra light poles. So
gotcha.
It will be more disturbance to the area and to the aesthetics when you are deploying 60 to 80 small cell nodes in the area.
Thank you.
I think that someone just commented that we had, I believe it was 46 small cell nodes and what is it called? Crown Castle and DAS right here in Great Falls. Isn't that correct?
There might be 46, but we are not located on all those 46 nodes.
Okay, so that is.
I'm not aware of all the 46 nodes, but there are. We have a lot more in the Tyson's Corner mall area, about 20 nodes. We're planning to deploy there, but in Great Falls, it's not 46 that Verizon is co-located on.
Okay, so you've co-located on less than the amount that we have here in the village of Great Falls. Based on the fact that we've got a couple of chats going and we've taken care of the Q&As, I'm going to go to the hands that are raised right now, and we have Ann Yuen. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for organizing this.
Go ahead.
I want to, I raised my hand when I heard the comment, and I wrote in the comment box about Catherine's comment concerning the interchapel opposition back then. I do want to add, as I just heard the comment from Verizon regarding building small cells would cause more disturbance. What is the feasibility of presenting that alternate solution, like a map of how it would be designed? And I oppose this monopole based on what I've heard so far.
Do we have a response from Milestone or Verizon for that comment? If there is a possibility to present something, or is it just something that Verizon is not going to consider at this time?
Now I will defer to you on that question.
At this time, we do not have any proposal or a request for funding to deploy small cells in this area.
Okay,
Thank
you. Right now, we're going to go to Glenn Rosenbluth.
Yeah, hi. I live in.
What did you do? There you go. Sorry, Glenn.
It keeps on saying unmute. I live at Brownsville, Beulah, and the service here is appallable. I have a 5G phone. I'm pulling in 200 megabytes in Tyson's Corner, which is twice as fast as the Fios that I'm getting. I'm paying Verizon $250 something for TV, and God knows what for wireless. It's $300-400. Financially, to me, working from home, it's a huge thing. We have no service here. The closest large cell site is at the self-storage on Route 7. The other option is the VDOT on Sunset Hills, which are all more than miles away from here. The service is unacceptable. The tree pole proposal, I think, is extremely attractive, and I completely support this project.
And just to clarify, Glenn is an employee of Milestone, but he also is a resident of the community.
Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sudarshan.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for organizing this. I think my question is similar to what Anne just raised. Are there any formal studies done by Verizon or by Milestone on the small cell? If there are, can it be made public and comments accepted, right? Or is it just a hunch? Verizon does not want to go down that path for whatever reason. It is not how any large project like this would be made for anything else, right? So alternative solutions should be weighed equally versus this one went so far down the path of selecting it versus pretty minimal diligence on the other solution, right? So the fair thing to do here would be do the full-blown analysis of what it would be what it would take and what it would give to do the small cell technology, and then do the same kind of rounds with both side by side versus a very predetermined solution option that is on the table here, right? It is not fair to the community. It is not fair to anyone here. So the right thing to do is to have both and to then consider the puts and takes and drive a decision that way. So I'm opposing the solution, which is a predetermined solution coming into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And is it safe to assume, Chris, Milestone only does the monopole? This would be something that Verizon or any other carrier would have to do outside of Milestone, correct?
Yeah, it's not, small cells aren't really anything that I can comment on. So tough to be a Verizon decision.
Okay, and then Noad just said that basically that's not a budget issue, or they have not considered funding for small cell at this time. So if it's okay, what we'll do is we'll go to Doug. We only have a few more hands raised, and then we can go back to Milestone and Verizon for some comments and then wrap this up. So go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. I've been a resident for many years, and I remember back in 1989 when the fire station was first proposed, our neighborhood, after some initial concerns and what have you, welcomed the fire station. And one of the deals with that at the time, the county said that there would be no commercial development on that 12 acres. And there was a pretty big period after that. In 1995, another cell phone company proposed a similar tower. And this is a carbon copy of that session. And in that session, as a fact, some of the same people who have spoken this evening spoke at that session. And I happen to have a videotape of that session. It was provided under FOIA from Fairfax County. And it's available to anyone that would like to have a copy. I have sent a copy to Supervisor Faust's office. There's a particular 8-minute segment of that which describes rather completely the county's commitments to our community at that time. And that cell phone tower was defeated for a number of purposes, but also because of that commitment did not provide access to that site to commercial ventures. And I will leave it at that. If anyone would like to have a copy of the videotape, it runs 4 hours. The cell phone tower portion of it is about 2 hours. The pertinent section of it is about 8 minutes. Thank you very much. I appreciate you setting it up, and looking forward to a rapid conclusion to this situation.
Doug, if you did not list your last name, would you care to share and let me know your neighborhood?
I'm from a country place. My last name is Lovejoy, Lovejoy. My email address is lovejoydc@gmail.com.
Thank
I'll
you.
set up a WeTransfer of the file. It's a big file.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we are going to go to, bear with me. Assign.
This is, I'm speaking for my wife, Heather Watt, that we understand that the chief of planning for the county is online. We'd like to know his views based on everything that he's heard. Thank you.
Hi, hello.
Jennifer?
Go ahead, John. Hussein, if you could stand by while John Oldfelder answers a question, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, sure, no problem.
Hi, I'm the planning commissioner for the Drainsville district. And the reality is at this point, staff has not completed its staff report yet on this application. And since we're going to be called upon, I think our hearing is May 12th, to hear from the staff, hear from the applicant, hear from the neighbors and the neighborhood, I need to keep an open mind. So at this point, I'm not assuming any position one way or other on this application. And I'm just listening to what everybody has to say, to the issues you've raised, the questions you've raised, and then there'll be further information as we get closer to the public hearing. And then at that point, the entire planning commission will be called upon to vote on a recommendation on the application to be sent forward to the Board of Supervisors, which actually has the ultimate decision. And I think they're hearings for June 8th. So those two hearings are already scheduled, but they're a little ways off, and I'm just keeping an open mind. But I certainly appreciate everybody's points and involvement this evening. It's been very helpful.
Thank you, John. Go ahead, Hussein.
Jennifer, thank you very much for arranging this meeting. I'm living in Middleton Ridge. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Middleton Ridge, which is almost the other side of the Beulah. And I'm very concerned of the health of this tower, which is going to create a lot of problem for us, which I have did some research. There's some people say that it has a lot of effect on health, and also it's going to create a lot of eye pollution, which you can see it from the other side of the street and from the other side of the Route 7. Probably with all this hearing, maybe a small cell would be better situation. So I'm really opposed of this tower, the tall one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have, I believe, we have somebody that is Susam or Susan. We're going to allow you to talk, and please, if we have your name incorrect, please identify yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Is it Susam or Susan?
Susan Zuckerman from Bow Ridge, acting president of Bow Ridge. We're off of Route 7 and Atwood, or Beulah and Atwood, both sides. So I've lived here for over 30 years. I've had Verizon for most of the time, and had good self-service up until about somewhere around 3 years ago. So I don't know what they did that things suddenly got worse, but it did. And then about 1.5 years ago, as it continued to get worse, I called Verizon to complain, and they ended up sending me a free device that hooks up into my Wi-Fi. And I'm not quite certain what it does, but it ends up getting me, very good self-service within the house, though. And however it then connects out to the towers, I'm not certain. But my point is, Verizon will give a free device if you're having problems in your home. I don't think it's going to be a visual issue, but for our subdivision, though maybe the homeowners that are closer to Beulah, it might be visible. I'm not quite certain. However, I am concerned about the potential health issues. I'm also very concerned that Verizon would be proposing to put up a cell tower that's 4G instead of 5G. I mean, we're 3 miles from Tyson's Corner, big high-tech area. Why are they, if they're going to build and put something new in, why would we be approving to let them put in old technology? If this thing gets approved, as a minimum, we should require them to go with 5G. But I am concerned, I share the concerns of the subdivisions that will have it very visible and in their backyard, so to speak. And I'm concerned about the health issues. So I guess I'm a bit undecided at this point, but if they're definitely going to put up 4G, then I would object to that. Because if people have to suffer to get a cell tower, at least it should be the highest technology, the newest technology rather. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have Steve Petroff.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Jennifer, for setting this up and taking my question. We are also a Spring Ridge neighborhood family. And I'll say that when that tower was proposed, we were pretty excited because the reception here for Verizon is not very good. However, we heard a comment tonight that kind of changed our mind on this. When the Potomac Vegetable Farms people were approached with putting a tower there, which would have been smack in our backyard and would have been awful. I wouldn't have liked it. And so really for that reason, I am in total favor of our neighbors and friends in the Bent Creek neighborhood not to get that tower. And I think that Verizon really owes everyone a deeper alternative here to the DATS choice, the node choice, to get that up and running as opposed to a big, huge tower that I know I certainly wouldn't want in my backyard, staring at it, all year long. So, anyhow, I support our neighbors and I oppose this. And that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And now I'm going to go to Bill Canis, president of the GFCA. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks. Here we are all going into the second hour, and we have over 50 people here. It says that this is a very worthwhile conversation to have. Just a couple of observations I'd make. First of all, this is a GFCA program, but Supervisor Faust's office promoted this quite extensively. In fact, I would say to Ben Wiles, every time I turned on my computer, it seemed there was another promotion of this event by the Faust office. And I want to thank the Faust office for doing that. And I don't think that if they were indifferent to the neighbors, that they would have gone out of their way to try to promote so much interest in this session tonight. So first, I would just say that and thank Ben Wiles as well as John Ulfelder and Kathy Lewis, for that matter, for all tuning in to hear this very interesting technological discussion. Secondly, just a point for Chris from Milestone. Appreciated his comparisons. I would say that the cell tower down at Matchless further on Route 7 is in a little bit of a different category. That is the only industrially zoned part of Great Falls. And so to have a cell phone tower in an industrial area surrounded by 7-Eleven, Meadows Farms, the car repair shop, and some other type of facilities like that is really not comparable to this neighborhood. The third point and observation I'd like to make is that this discussion about small cells really is quite interesting. I'm not a technologist by any way. I can't weigh all of the arguments we've heard tonight. I expect that Kathy Lewis and her staff will have to do a job of this with John Ulfelder to come up with a reasoned view of that. But I would observe that Great Falls is pretty much served by a small cell network. And our service here did improve a few years ago when those were put on telephone poles throughout Great Falls. Someone observed that that was disruptive to do that. And I can't say that there was a lot of disruption in Great Falls to have that system put throughout here. And so that's just a personal observation about the small cell structure. But obviously, if that could work in this neighborhood, that would be a win-win for everyone. And the last thing I would just say is that before COVID, I used to drive and commute up and down Beulah and Browns Mill quite frequently, and that the county needs to make sure that whatever is done here serves that neighborhood. Not only are there people living there, but the traffic down there is unfortunately quite extensive. People cutting back and forth between Reston and Vienna and Route 7. And if any area needs to have motorists clued in and tuned in, I would say it's that deep valley that is down there off of Beulah and Browns Mill. So just a personal observation. And again, thank so many people for coming tonight and engaging in this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I want to go back to Chris to see if you and your representatives have any closing remarks.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Paul Dugan just to speak briefly on any of the health concerns some of the folks raised during this call, and then just had a few closing comments. So, Paul, if you don't mind speaking to some of that.
Sure. Good evening. I'm going to share my perspective on concerns for potential health effects. I am a registered professional.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. Just to preface this, Paul is a consultant of Milestone, though he has done many studies for wireless carriers now outside of Milestone work. So just want to make sure that's clear.
Yes. Allow me just a few minutes to share my perspective on RF safety. I'm a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Virginia with 38 years of experience in wireless telecommunications, while performing safety compliance certifications of antenna sites for 25 years. As a registered professional engineer, my first priority is to hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The FCC has sole jurisdiction over the regulation of electromagnetic fields, and the subject is preempted provided the facilities comply with the guidelines. The FCC guidelines for operating wireless networks are based on the recommendations of several national and international health and safety agencies. In December of 2019, the FCC issued a revised policy on RF exposure. However, the RF exposure limits, the FCC has reaffirmed that the existing exposure limits are more than sufficient for the diverse makeup of demographics, including children, and the current and next generation future deployment of low-power wireless networks. The World Health Organization states that no evidence of adverse health impacts exists from any wireless technology. The low power, and some of those folks were claiming that these are high-power broadcasts, is nothing further from the truth. These are not broadcast towers that are serving a major city. These are low power, only serving up to about a mile or two in radius from the proposed structure location. And the low power which the facilities operate and the substantial horizontal and vertical separation of the antennas from surrounding uses should not be any basis for concern. RF energy has existed for over 100 years, while cell towers have existed for 36 years. The highest exposure near base stations is typically less than 1,000th of the exposure limits. There is no accepted science that indicates there is a risk from low levels of RF exposure, nor is RF exposure cumulative when multiple carriers co-locate. Milestone often hires third-party engineers to perform annual monitoring of antenna structures. The results repeatedly reaffirm that RF exposure at antenna sites always falls substantially below the federal safety guidelines. For the proposed monopole, I've reviewed the antenna configuration and operating parameters of Verizon, along with common antenna configurations of the wireless carriers. There's no cumulative impact of low levels of non-ionizing electromagnetic field exposure. None of these facilities are high-power broadcast facilities, and no areas at ground level will exceed or approach 1% of the federal safety standard, which contains a substantial margin of safety.
Great, thank you, Paul. And in addition to that, Milestone conducts annual radio frequency testing at all of our sites to ensure compliance with FCC limits. And again, to Paul's comment, we're typically over 1,000 times below those FCC limits. Just in closing, I think, thank you everyone for participating. Obviously, it means a lot to your community that there is a service solution in this area, and it seems like most of you are of the mind that small cells are the best solution, and I respectfully disagree for several reasons. One is that this macro tower, this monopole, will be able to house multiple carriers and provide capacity for future upgrades for all Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish. It will provide space for public safety needs. We reserve space on the tower for Fairfax County Public Safety. We also provide capacity for local broadband providers and WISPs. We share the revenue with the county. So we are contributing to the county. We're partnering with the county. It's a public safety concern that there's not sufficient coverage in this area, as COVID has taught us, and things may turn more back to normal over the next year or so. But the fact of the matter there is not as many people are going to be going back to work. Students have adapted to a learning from home environment. Telemedicine is even more prevalent now than it was. And there's just so many things now that people are relying on wireless service for that they weren't previously, and COVID made us aware of. Whether that goes back to flips 180 again, I doubt. I think it'll be somewhere in the middle. And I think this tower will provide a great benefit to your all's community. And with that, I thank you for letting us speak tonight. Please feel free to reach out to us. I believe you all have my email. And as stated before, the website is wolftrapsfwireless.com. You can submit any comments through there, through the comment box. Our contact information should be there as well. As Commissioner Hohlfelder stated, we have not gone through our full review through county planning and zoning staff yet. So I believe right now we're tentatively scheduled for a May 12th Planning Commission date, but that is subject to change based off of Planning and Zoning's timing for their staff report. And we will make sure to update our website and provide Ms. Falcone updates so that she can push them off to you all as well. So again, please feel free to reach out if we do move on to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors hearings. Those are public hearings. Thank you, Jennifer, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to you and all of the Milestone staff and your consultants for joining in tonight. On behalf of the Great Falls Citizens Association Land Use and Zoning, we became particularly interested in this issue as it affects pretty much the gateway to Great Falls on Route 7. So we did obviously reach out to these members of the community to allow them to join this forum to get the most up-to-date information. And we certainly appreciate the staff of Fairfax County joining in and look forward to their questions and review of your process, and especially again thanking Commissioner Ohlfelder for joining as well. So we will, and Ben Wiles, thank you again for joining in and facilitating this meeting. We will be posting the video of this webinar on the GFCA YouTube channel along with the link on our website, and I believe everyone has my email. If you do not, it's jennifer.falcone, at gfca.org, or you can reach me at zoning@gfca.org for any questions or for any more information. We'll try and get everyone to the right place so that we can get all of the information on this particular issue. I'm pleased that we had over 60 participants tonight, and I thank everyone for their time, and we did this in record time, so I appreciate that, and I look forward to assisting anyone when the need arises. Again, thanks again, and have a great evening.